This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. We start with K-State grain market economist Dan O'Brien. He shares about anticipated volatility in the market expected mid-September. He also comments on the energy crisis in Europe, potentially leading to high fertilizer costs this coming spring. Also ahead, the Department of Communications and Agricultural Education is highlighted by K-State teaching assistant professor Brandie Disberger, as well as 4 students. They each share their favorite experiences and advice on getting involved. We conclude this week's programming prior to our long weekend ahead with K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. He reports on the isolated precipitation that provided some relief to parts of the state this past week and the anticipated high temps expected through the first several weeks of September. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with our weekly grain market report from our grain market economist here at K-State, Dan O'Brien. So, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Samantha.
So we're going to start a little bit different today. We wanted to hit on this first and foremost. It's a little bit of news coming out of the Foreign Ag Service. Their weekly reports that we're used to getting from them on exports, they're going to be delayed for the next 3 weeks.
There was a report that came out shortly after the numbers they turned out last week that they had a data glitch. They, being the Foreign Ag Service, had a data glitch in their weekly export reporting number, and that they wouldn't have these numbers available to the public, which would tell, who bought grain, what quantity, where it's going, etc. They wouldn't have that available till September 15th. It may or may not be a big issue, but still, so when we get out into mid-September, we'll have on September the 12th, the USDA crop production report, in my thinking, is probably the biggest crop report of the year. The USDA will finally get out into fields, will establish a baseline, will either prove or disprove the accuracy of that Midwest crop report last year with numbers, yields, production that came in way lower, markedly lower, 13.7 billion as opposed to 14.3 that the USDA had said. So that could go either way, and I've seen estimates that we can talk about later with regard to corn and all that for how the supply and demand works. So either way, that'll be a surprise to the market. And that comes out on the 12th. Then on the 15th, we'll find out what's been happening in grain market exports since the last week in August on the 15th September. So I guess the uncertainty that I see in the market is that if buyers in foreign countries are really, really worried about what the U.S. numbers might be, and if they rush in whatever way they can to start buying grain, and we're not fully informed about it, one shoe dropping and then the other shoe dropping, first the supply side with the crop report and then the demand side with the exports, there's potential for a lot more volatility than normal and a fair amount of grain price movement. So I'm concerned about it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one as we look at these markets.
Absolutely, yeah. Something that we'll keep in mind here and we'll keep an eye on as we continue on. It's insane to think about it already being September. It seems like just yesterday we're like in a few weeks, a month or so.
Harvest is just around the corner for corn. I would say, since we're talking about that, we've caught some rains in parts of western Kansas, and grain sorghum that had been looking pretty rough did what grain sorghum does, it just hang around until maybe it gets moisture. And so in some places it has now laid, not full profile replenishing, but enough to come up with a decent head. And now the race will be, if I understand what our agronomic brethren have talked about grain sorghum for a while, if we do get late heads, will we mature by the time frost comes and be able to harvest a crop? So we'll see. I guess hope springs eternal, and we'll see if the grain sorghum comes through. And hopefully the dryland corn that's out there will come through better than some people are expecting as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That precipitation that we've been getting periodically that's just been helping us continue on the little bit that we've been able to, it was a welcome sight for a lot of people this past week, and we'll talk about that a bit in our weather report coming up as well. So stay tuned for that. But Dan, let's really get into the futures markets. What have they shown? Anything crazy?
Well, corn market on Thursday, closed with Dees corn, which is now the lead contract for the sake of what elevators would use, 658, and that is down a little bit from 668, but up from about 560 of where we were in essence at the beginning of July. So we've had a pretty good run on corn and come down just a little bit off those highs. And corn prices, with regard to that, you still see really strong spot basis levels for cash prices and for new crop bids across most of the state. Again, basis running from high of $1.10 over in Garden City up to cash price of $7.68, a low basically in Salina of 69 cents over basis, $7.27, and then some other places that are also strong. Colby 90 over, Hutchinson 85 over, Columbus 75 over. So pretty strong prices. And grain sorghum going off of also that D's corn contract now 30 over, 40 over on the high side, and then Salina 10 over, 25 over, 16. A little bit of weakness in Topeka for whatever reason, at least. It may be only temporary, but you have a little weaker basis bid. So you see that in the feed grain. If we're trying to assess the feed grain market, I think we still have a lot of people that are anxious to get hold of grains. We don't see the bids from livestock feeders on these cash bids from elevators. Livestock feeder bids, at the time we were talking about $1 over or $1.10 over in some of these areas. As I was talking with producers, they're like $1.40 or even stronger. So a lot of anxious people with livestock to feed, ethanol plants to run, trying to get hold of any grain that they can. So with that, I think it'll be really something to see. I have a longer-term concern as we head off into next year for corn, and that's this issue that we see happening in Europe in terms of natural gas prices and supplies being so constrained that this is tied up with the Russian pipeline coming into European states and all the reticence of Russia to send this now, given this war situation. It's very possible that extremely tight situation we have now in Germany, elsewhere, could get even tighter heading off into the winter months. We're not even into winter yet. And if that goes higher, then it's a double-edged sword for us. Of course, the energy markets would be strong. We'd see ethanol hold up pretty well. So that'd be on the good side for ag. But again, natural gas, primary feedstock for fertilizer, we'd be really worried about where fertilizer prices could go. I've read reports of the building up of stocks, et cetera. And if you and I are thinking about this, you can bet our crop producers trying to think that much farther ahead and trying to secure supplies at a decent price. So I wouldn't be surprised that the European natural gas and energy market issue could have a big impact on what we're able to do in agriculture coming out of 22, heading off into 23.
Absolutely. I think that's a concern of everyone at this point after the rough year in terms of fertilizer prices that we had just this past spring.
We look at $1,000 a ton as, gosh, it's only that.
Yeah.
It was 14 to 15 to 6 or higher at the height of that last year, and it just ramps up cost of production quite a bit. That's the issue. So if that be the case, then we'll need $6.5, $7 plus corn to pay for the higher costs, and if we get into that situation again.
In terms of our wheat and soybean markets, there's been some interesting things going on in theirs. Tell us a little bit about that.
There's a back and forth kind of theater issue going on. That's probably not a good grain market term when you look at what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. So there have been some shipment of feed grains, and now it's starting to be some wheat coming out of Ukraine. The prices that they're bringing out in the market are very competitive. Their currency is not doing great, and reports now that there's enough wheat out on the market from Ukraine that is starting to work against Russian grain exports. So the cynical economist in me thinks, well, so if by letting grain flow out of Ukraine as Russia is being hurt, I don't know that that's a sustainable long-term situation. So I'm really curious to see how that will work out. Right now, again, Ukraine has sent out a headline here this week on Thursday saying that Ukraine says southern offensive by Russia, quote, not affecting the grain corridor. Well, wow. To try to ship grain and, we're fighting a war at the same time. What a deal. So, but when that grain, again, wheat and corn comes out from Ukraine, it competes very well against the United States for exports. So it's something to watch going forward. I might also mention on soybeans, we talked about the price movement in the last week, and we had run up from a low back in, again, early July, about July 10th, 13th or so, of about $12.80, $12.90, up to a high of about, literally just under $15 within the last week or so. And now we're down to $13.94, just volatility and hopping around. Some of that's come down to probably, again, a Midwest crop tour came in with a very healthy yield for soybeans, so that's mitigating some concerns. Expectations of a record high crops in South America. At least that's their intention. They have to actually plant those crops first, so they'd be harvested next year. So all that in play, and I would say, just kind of to finish up, we take those numbers out of that Midwest crop tour, and are they the right numbers or not here? The USDA said 175 bushels an acre for corn. The Midwest crop tour said, in essence, 168 and change, and that's a big swing. I've seen some other crop models that seem to be trustworthy. Greg Eibendahl in our shop came out and said, using a modeling approach that he had, came in with a number pretty close to what the USDA had said. I'm more inclined to think that the consensus of models that I've seen is more like 170 to 172 bushels per acre and production of 14.1 or 13.9 billion bushels. And you're plenty tight in stocks to use just with that. You're at 1.2, 1.3. You're at 8.5 to 9.3% stocks to use. Corn prices, $6.90 to as high as $7.50 to $8. So chances are that we're probably seeing not as high as the USDA's number, in my view, and maybe not as low as Midwest Crop Tour. So being a thoroughgoing economist, I guess I'll go in the middle until I can figure out what's going on.
You'll pull the Goldilocks today.
I guess so. But there are a number of other modeling efforts coming out saying 170, 172, 172.5. And for the soybean market, really the only thing that would fall apart on that, given the world's thirst for oil seeds, is if Brazil had a tremendous crop, if it actually came to fruition, and a high U.S. dollar worked against us out into 2023 on exports, then that's probably our risk scenario in the first half of that year. But there's a long way to go before we get there.
Dan, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Samantha. Take care.
Once again, that was Dan O'Brien. He is our K-State grain market economist covering this week's grain market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with a big group in the studio, which is always fun and exciting. But our team of individuals that we have with us today are from the Department of Communications and Agricultural Education here at K-State. But representing them faculty-wise is Brandie Disberger. She's a teaching assistant and professor in the department. So, Brandie, thank you for being here with us.
It's great to share about our program and, most importantly, our students.
Absolutely. And speaking of students, I'm going to go ahead and have you guys introduce yourselves one at a time.
I'm Mackenzie Wagner. I'm a junior here studying agricultural communications and journalism, and I am the environmental option.
My name is Molly Biggs. I'm also majoring in agricultural communications and journalism, but I'm on the agriculture option.
My name is Elizabeth Sturgis. I'm a junior majoring in agricultural education.
Hi, I'm Alex Scoville. I'm a junior majoring in ag education.
Excellent. Well, like I said, a big group in the studio today, which always makes things fun. But before we get to talking to you guys about your experiences student-wise in the department, I'm going to get some of the hardcore facts from you, Brandie, if that's okay. So in terms of what majors there are, I heard 2 there, but with some options, it sounds like. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. So we have 2 majors in the department. Our agricultural education students are seeking a degree option in order to obtain a teaching certificate, but many of them will customize that major by adding a minor throughout the College of Agriculture or even beyond. On the agricultural communications side of things, our students can focus either on environmental or agricultural options.
What does enrollment currently look like in y'all's department?
So we have moderate-sized programs, which in our opinion allows us to have really great relationships among and faculty to students and students to students. In each program, we have around 70 to 80 undergraduate students. So small enough to get to know everybody, but large enough to have all of the opportunities that come with a bigger program.
Excellent. And some of those opportunities include things like what?
Our students all are required to do internships, so they get some hands-on experience. They're involved in clubs and organizations specific to their majors. So we have the Agricultural Education Club, and we have the Agricultural Communications of Tomorrow. We also do international experiences out of our department, as well as having all sorts of volunteerism projects for our students to get that hands-on experience before they're ready to hit the career.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. And I'm sure you guys are involved in lots of those. So club-wise, What are you guys involved in, and what is really so special about those clubs?
I am currently in the Agricultural Communicators of Tomorrow. I'm currently serving as the president, and we just try and cover every aspect in AgCom. You know, it's not just writing, graphic design. There's so many different skills that go into the major, so there's really anything for anyone. We try and bring in speakers that talk about all those different options. We have some kids come and talk about their internships experiences, and we also like to have some fun meetings, you know, where we kind of get out of our comfort zone and maybe not just sitting in the classroom learning things, but get to know each other on a more personal level, because like we talked about, the department is so small, or smaller I should say, that you know, you kind of get to know everyone in there. And we're lucky enough to win some awards this summer, their national conference, so that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, congratulations about that. I heard about that. That's a big deal. It's awesome.
Within agricultural education, we have Agricultural Education Club. So I'm actually our club secretary. Our club really focuses on service and necessarily don't have as many like competitions like maybe ACT does, but we do have different service opportunities throughout the semester. We get our students out into different classrooms to really visit those teachers. And we have social meetings and professional meetings to make sure that we're hitting all of the marks for our students to feel ready to leave K-State prepared to teach. We are actually selected as one of the host sites as well for Teach Ag Day on September 15th. So our students will get to celebrate together and have some little goodies to celebrate that.
You mentioned internships being a big part of these students' experiences here at K-State, something that's required of them. That's amazing. What are some of the internships that students commonly take part in?
Great question. So on the agricultural education side, our students do a student teaching internship as a requirement to get their degree and teaching certificate. On the other hand, many of them do very traditional internships as well. They could be working with K-State Research and Extension across the state or in other states. Some actually go and work for industry to get some very hands-on experience, maybe working with an agronomy operation. Some are really interested in animal science, and they like to work on the youth side of things. So they might work to coordinate some youth events for different associations.
In terms of other unique opportunities in this department, some of the classes you guys take are very hands-on. You're actively putting together projects. What are some of those like?
Being in the AgCom department, it's really cool to see with those smaller classes, there's more experience there for us, like Molly mentioned before, and there's so many different classes that you can take where you're learning about InDesign, different software programs, and that kind of stuff. And I think it's really nice because we do have those smaller class sizes that you're able to work one-on-one with your professor and kind of learning how to really dive into those areas that you really enjoy and growing your experience in those.
If you could go back and tell freshman you one piece of advice when you were starting in K-State in this department, what would that piece of advice be?
If I was talking to my freshman self, and I don't necessarily think this is just for being in the certain department, but just, you know, College of Ag and university-wide, just go and get involved in something, you know, whether it be within our majors or joining Block and Bridle, which is a part of the animal science major, just going and meeting people and just being social. I know sometimes it's hard. It's still hard for me, just getting out of your comfort zone, but we all have something in common in ag, but you know, there's always a little bit something that makes us all different. Just kind of get out of your comfort zone and join something new. So
I remember coming in freshman year thinking, I don't want to take a lot of animal science classes. I don't want to take a lot of horticulture classes because maybe I'm not as interested in those things. And I definitely don't want to take welding because that scares me, which, you know, but as you go throughout your college career, you realize, especially within agricultural education, if I'm going to teach these subjects, I need to be able to go through the classes in college and really dive deep into those now instead of getting into the classroom and then spending hours and hours at night trying to learn the material to teach students then. And so one of my pieces of advice is just to take the classes that scare you a little bit, because it's much better to take them now in a safe environment with your peers, with teachers that care about you and professors that want to ensure that you're doing well in your classes and ensure that you understand the concepts. It's a lot better to take those now than to try and figure it out on your own later.
Building some wisdom here for sure. But also, I guess one of my questions is why this department here at K-State?
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, so I was looking at a couple different out-of-state schools when I was in high school, and K-State was one of the first ones I visited, and I really appreciated, you know, one of the first people I met with was Dr. Disberger here, and it was a very warm, exciting welcome that I could tell that everyone across the university, but especially in the College of Ag, was excited to have me here, and it was like, yes, we want you to be a student here, and that was a huge pull for me, and I'm really glad that I'm here because it's definitely been that same thing of a very welcoming environment.
I would agree with what Alex was saying. Walking onto campus for the first time, you could just feel the family atmosphere. And I actually switched my major a couple times just because I was looking for a community that we had similarities to. And so I went from marketing to history education to where I am now. Very diverse. But I stayed because of the people around me and just finding that community that I was searching for.
Yeah, I'll second what both of these guys said. I'm originally from Illinois, and we had family friends that came out here, and they always talked about K-State family, and I was like, okay, well, what really is that? And that, I think, can be a word that gets thrown around sometimes when you go on recruiting visits, but when you're here, it's true. I mean, we all are a family. I know on my first visit, I met with Dr. Starzek, and then I came back in the fall for an Ag Experience Day, and she remembered that we met with each other. So it was like, okay, these people care about you, and they care about your future, and, they're invested in that.
Yeah, definitely the family atmosphere. I think it always makes me feel really confident in the decision that I made coming to K-State when I go other places and they talk about, oh, you go to K-State, I have so many friends that go there, or I've heard so many good things about K-State. I think it also says a lot to be in the College of Ag in K-State and be the first land-grant university. That's a pretty big bragging point to your friends that go to different College of Ags, but you get to really get to know everybody within your major, especially like within the College of Ag, we have the faculty advising. And so those professors that are teaching you in the classroom are then sitting down with you at the end of each semester and saying, how did you like these classes? What can I do for you? And so you feel like you never really left home because you're around a bunch of adults that want to be your parents and take care of you and people that want to be your siblings, basically. And so, again, the family atmosphere, and it's kind of a confident boost to remember that you're in one of the best College of Ags in the nation.
Absolutely. And then in terms of favorite memories, does anybody have a favorite memory in your department that you've experienced so far?
I'm not sure it's exactly within the department, but I think being an ag education major has allowed this is the amount of freedom that the major gives you, with giving you kind of a taste within each area, but enough information in, animal science or agronomy or ag business allows you to get involved in different areas. So I'm on the meat judging team, and I've really enjoyed that, and I've made some awesome memories there. And I appreciate that ag ed has given me the freedom to go and get involved within animal science.
I think one of my favorite memories is just in our little Ag Ed lounge that's right on the third floor of Umberger. We just all sit out there before class and just kind of talk about our days, and just getting to know people on that personal level I think is always fun. And I really enjoyed last spring when we had open house and Ag Ed Club helps to organize a scavenger hunt, and it was really cool to meet with people from the community that wanted to get to know us and get to know the College of Ag and just really see how much Manhattan cares about the College of Ag too.
I guess my favorite, it's not too much of a memory, just like something that happens on a regular basis, but from the first time I stepped into the AgCom department, the advisors, the faculty here, they all know me by my first name. And so coming in as like a switching major student, just walking in and them knowing me after like the second week of classes was pretty cool.
I can't thank you guys enough for your time. These are busy students that have come in today, taking the time out of their day to meet with us. So thank you guys so much. Brandie, you as well. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Once again, those were individuals from the Department of Communications and Agricultural Education here at K-State, highlighting their department. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are closing out our Friday programming with meteorologist Chip Redmond. So, Chip, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
I know this past week there were some isolated precipitation events across parts of the state, so tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, not everybody got moisture, and the lucky folks that did. We had an isolated event that happened there Wednesday night into Thursday that really benefited portions of northwest Kansas, especially the Tribune area. Greeley County corridor there just keeps getting in on beneficial moisture kind of once a week almost, which they've made them one of the wettest locations in the state, which is fairly rare. But we also had some rain in central and eastern Kansas, especially in that Marion County corridor into the Flint Hills, where they got up to an inch and a half of very beneficial rain. Unfortunately, some of it did come down a little too hard. We had some runoff, and it didn't really soak into the ground. But to focus on the positive here, we had some moisture across state, and we saw some bumps in humidity as well as increased cloud cover and slightly cooler temperatures than what we saw over the weekend.
I know that you said these were very isolated events, so I'm guessing that means the rest of the state wasn't as lucky in terms of the precipitation they got. So as a result of that, were there any changes in the drought monitor that we should be aware of?
Yeah, we had a little bit of positive changes that we could focus on first. That Greeley County area along the Colorado border that did get that moisture, they saw a one-class degradation to D0, which is just abnormally dry for them. And then we also saw a little thin corridor where I mentioned that Marion into the Flint Hills and central to East Kansas. They had a slight improvement as well, of one-class improvement. So they went from basically D2 to D1 drought. But south central Kansas, Wichita area down to Harper County and to the Oklahoma border went from D2 to D3. They got added an extreme drought this week. And then on the northern end of the state as well, we saw expansion in the northwest of drought conditions, and we also saw abnormally dry get added basically from Belleville all the way to Hiawatha in Donovan County. So the whole northern periphery now is down at least abnormally dry conditions. And the area of drought-free, what we call D-nada or nothing, is very, very small across the state, mostly focused in the northeast. That includes Manhattan as well as Topeka and parts of Kansas City.
We've been the lucky ones this summer for sure in the grand scheme of things. And I know that it seems like our luck has run out potentially. The next several weeks don't hold much for us precipitation-wise.
Yeah, we can't rule out some really spotty showers and storms throughout the Labor Day weekend and even into early next week. Very isolated storms where we might get a brief downpour. But overall, the forecast through the first full week of September, it looks pretty darn dry, below average precipitation is favored, and then really warm. There's a ton of heat that's building to our west and our north, where they're having some extremely warm temperatures and even record temperatures. We're not quite going to see it push to record criteria, but through September 10th, even in mid-September the 14th, above normal temperatures are preferred, and that's just a really warm, dry pattern that we can't quite break. As you look kind of beyond that, there is some hints that maybe by mid-September you could see a bump in the moisture as you kind of keep that southerly flow. Do you have a typhoon out in the West Pacific again? That's actually a very strong typhoon that's formed, but it's so far west, by the time it gets into the flow, it's not going to really help break down this pattern. So while we have an increase in moisture potential for mid-September, I'm not too optimistic just because we don't have a big wrench thrown into the jet stream to really break this pattern down. Above normal temperatures, below normal precipitation is the rule.
With all of this in mind, when I'm thinking about the next several weeks that we have ahead of us, planting season is approaching for quite a few different crops. So anything optimistic in terms of soil conditions for that?
Yeah, just the areas that got timely rains, thinking of like Greeley, county, maybe you might see some beneficial bumps in soil moisture, and we actually have. But overall, really dry conditions in the soils would be favorable for harvest. Mm-hmm. But, it's definitely hopeful for a pattern change maybe into early October when folks are looking to put in that wheat. But right now, just not really seeing it with dry soils likely to persist.
Well, Chip, as always, we thank you so much for your time and for this update.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Chip Redmond. He is our K-State meteorologist, providing this week's agricultural weather report. That concludes today's programming. We'll be back with more next week on Agriculture Today.